والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن استنى بسنة إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on His last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. This evening's topic, Man, Religion and Society, addresses fundamentally the issue of whether religion, belief in God, is relevant to human society in these times, whether it is in the 20th century or the 21st century or beyond. Some would have us believe that it isn't relevant. The secular materialists argue that human beings are accidents of nature. The Darwinian theories are used to support this claim. Our grandparents or great ancestors were monkeys. This is their belief. And consequently, when we observe the animal kingdom, we don't find gorillas and baboons worshipping. So then, this thing of worship and God must be a figment of human imagination. And we found in the field of psychology, sociology, those who stepped forth to give, quote-unquote, scientific explanations for the belief in God. Where did it come from? Why did people invent this figment of their imagination? And Freud, Sigmund Freud, in his book called Interpretation of Dreams, which he wrote in 1899, he put forth the explanation which became most popular amongst psychologists and sociologists thereafter. His explanation was the Oedipus or Oedipus complex. He said that the result, the belief in God, is a result of this complex. Now, what is the Oedipus complex? Oedipus, in Greek mythology, was the king of Thebes, who unwittingly killed his father and married his mother. Right? In psychoanalytic theory, the Oedipus complex represents a desire for sexual involvement with the parent of the opposite sex, and a concomitant sense of rivalry with the parent of the same sex. This, in layman's terms, is something which has been observed, that children between the ages of 3 and 5, they have a tendency to want to come between the parents. You'll find that the boys develop a jealousy for the mother. If the mother and father sit together, you'll see the boy comes and sits in between them. He wants the mother for himself. Okay? This is something observable. And the girls do a similar thing, right? They want the father. Okay? So this observation, Freud then took this observation, relating it back to this Greek mythology, and putting things in a sexual context, because for Freud, everything is explained by the sexual drive. Why we build buildings, why we drive cars, why we build airplanes, everything we do is because of our sexual urges. This is how Freud explains everything. So he then went to explain how it is that we had this belief in God using the Oedipal complex. He said that the early family, which evolved from the apes, that first family that came out, what happened was that the boys in the family became jealous of the father, right? And wanted to keep the mother for themselves, so they killed their father, like Oedipus. Right? They killed, except in Oedipus's case it was not intentional, but according to him, this early family, the young men of the family, they killed the father to keep the mother for themselves, out of a sexual desire for the mother. Now, after they killed the father, they felt the loss. Because the father was the one who used to go out and hunt, fight off the animals, build the home, look after the family. He was the protector, provider for the family. Now they didn't have the protector and provider anymore. So they became afraid. They became, worried. This whole job now was on them to look after the family. So what they did, again, what children tend to do, is they create fictional playmates. So in the same way, they said, these young men, then they created a fictional father. Father was still there. We killed him, but he's not dead. He's still there somewhere looking over us. This is the way the idea, the beginnings of the idea of God came. This was their explanation. And of course, they argue that God's existence cannot be scientifically proven anyway. We can't put it under any microscopes. And when we look at these religions, what do we see from religions but wars and strife and problems in human society? So, really, what's the relevance to human society? And also, with all these diversity of religions, which one of them is right anyway? If one of them is supposed, why is there so many different religions? That's it. It's obvious that this is not the solution. Human beings have to find a solution to their running of society from within themselves. They cannot depend on religion to do it for them, because religion, as they've concluded, was man-made anyway. So let us, human beings, in our times, in the 19th, 20th century, address our problems ourselves and work out our own solutions. We have the capability, we have reason, we have intelligence, we have knowledge of history. We can put all this together and we can work out our own problems. And out of that, thrust came, that secularist movement which sought to remove religion from all walks of life, relegating it only to a very small portion. Each person has his own personal religion. You keep it in your back pocket. You pull it out when you need it, but don't show it to anybody else. It's your personal thing. Okay? Otherwise, education, government, economics, everything else should not have religion interfering in it. This was the conclusion. Religion has no place in modern society. Now we have to look at what is the result of all this. One, the idea that human beings can put their minds together and democratically reason out what in fact is really best for human beings. This idea, when put to the test, has been proven wrong time and time again. The very concept of democracy in itself. Democracy came out of Athens, ancient Greece. And in ancient Greece, the democracy meant the rule of the people. Again, people's minds coming together and making these decisions. But ancient Greek society was more than 50% slaves who had no say. And the remaining 50% were divided between males and females. And females also had no say. So in the end, democracy didn't mean the rule of the people. It meant some 20 to 25% of the population actually decided what was best for everybody. When we look at it in a modern context, if we take the United States of America as the quote-unquote greatest democracy on the earth today, when we look at this great democracy and we look at its roots, in the American Constitution, written back in the 18th century, when the best minds, the most enlightened minds of American society got together and they wrote down the Constitution. And that American Constitution is like a religious scripture for Americans. It is kept in glass cage in Washington. People make pilgrimage to Washington to go and look at the American Constitution. You see? Well, in the American Constitution, in the first article, they have what was called the 3/5 compromise. What is the 3/5 compromise? It states there in the first article that a black man was to be considered 3/5 of a white man. This is the American Constitution. It's still there. You can go and see it in Washington today. I mean, of course, in time, with the Civil War and all the other things that came after it, modifications came, they made amendments, etc., etc., etc. But because this document is so sacred for them, they've kept it as is. You can go and read it with your own eyes. Now, this idea in our society today, the idea that one human being, because he belongs to what appears to be one particular group of society, is worth less than another human being, is abhorrent. But that is what the best and most enlightened minds of that time arrived at. What is that telling us? That is telling us that human beings, when they put their minds together, they cannot be objective. They really can't. They end up being subjective. They will make decisions based on what is in their class, caste, race, position, family, etc., interests. They will always make decisions relative to what is best for them and those around them. This is their nature. This is human nature. And all the laws, you go and take the Magna Carta, you go and take the laws from France, all the different legal systems that came up, over the last 300 years, and you look at the laws in there, and that's what you find. People making laws to suit themselves, not society as a whole. So, the human mind cannot really be trusted to come up with what is best for human beings as a whole. Cannot be trusted, though they claim it can. Secondly, what comes out of this approach, the secularist approach, is that morality becomes relative. Morality becomes relative. You have no foundation for morality anymore, because we get together and we have our votes, our elections, and in the course of our elections we will determine each year or each 10 years or whatever what is right and what is wrong. Right and wrong will change every so often. It's not stable. What does that mean for the society? It means a constant upheaval, and when we look in the end, sometimes we can see some trends towards the better, but other times we can see some trends towards what is the worst that human beings can arrive at. Because what happened? In America in particular, and I don't have any particular thing against Americans, because I grew up in Canada, it doesn't mean I don't like Americans. It's just because America is presented as the example. Right? So, if we look in America, what we find is that if we were to ask the average American 30 years ago, what is your opinion on homosexuality? The average American would say, remembering what it said in the Bible, this is an abomination unto the Lord. It's evil, it's bad, sick. This is what the average American would have said 30 years ago. And the medical profession had homosexuality in its list of illnesses. There were treatments for it, shock treatment, drug treatments, all kinds of treatments to help these sick people, correct themselves. Today, 20 years later, don't even get to where we are now. 20 years later, if you ask the average American, what do you think about homosexuality? What was their response? Personal choice. Maybe I don't like it myself, but it's people, it's their business. It's freedom of choice, if that's what they like, that is the attitude. Changed. Not only that, but the latest edition of the Psychiatrist's Bible had homosexuality removed as an illness. Removed, it's no longer there. In its place, they had homophobia. Those people who thought homosexuals are sick, need to be treated, these are now the sick people. They're the ones who need to be treated, they need to get psychiatric care and all this stuff. In 20 years' time, the whole thing turned upside down. How? Because there was no foundation to determine really what is right and what is wrong in the matter. They followed a principle which came out of the 50s, 60s, a principle which was first applied to heterosexual relations. When they started with the pill, being in common, people having common access to it, which meant that, relations between males and females outside of marriage was increasing, etc. And the swing of public opinion against looking at fornication as a crime anymore, and then also fornication and adultery. We don't want to look at it as crimes anymore because it's becoming so popular. So they had to figure out some kind of principle determine, where do we determine what is right and what is wrong in these matters. So they said, now if we leave this door open, then we have the door open for pedophiles, rape and this type of thing. So we have to have some principle that we're going to judge relations between males and females by, to determine what is acceptable and what is not. So the best minds of the time came together and they came up with the new principle. This new principle was what? Consenting adults. Consenting adults. So consenting meaning we rule out rape, right? This means that's bad. Rape is bad because it's not consenting. Adults means we rule out pedophilia because then you have an adult and a child. Okay, so that's bad, so we leave that out. But as long as now it's between consenting adults, then it's okay. Society has no right to get into people's affairs, their business. Because somebody who wants to come in between consenting adults and say, no, this is not good, this is fornication, this is adultery, and say, where did that come from? That's religion. That's religion saying this is bad. Who said this is bad? Where is the harm? So, consenting adults became the principle. In the 50s, 60s, along with this was the civil rights movement in America, where black Americans decided we've had enough. We can't take this anymore. Oppression, people not getting their rights, working same jobs, getting less pay, all the not having the rights to travel on the same buses as other people because they're a different color, all these different things, the oppression that exists in the society, people decided it was enough. So they started to demand their rights in marches, and it went to burning down cities. Till finally America said, okay, we'll give you your rights. Hold on. We don't want the whole country burnt down, so we'll stop. Okay, enough. We'll make some changes in our laws and, make sure you get your rights. Now, in the course of that movement, after it succeeded, reaches what was thought to be success and a climax, then the women said, what about us? What about us? We are also working the same jobs as men and we don't get the same pay. It's not fair. We're not able to get into certain jobs, we're denied certain jobs, certain positions, places, etc., etc. So people looked at it and said, yeah, that makes sense. We should be fair. Fairness, okay, women's rights. So we include that, women's rights, give them their rights. Right after them, the homosexuals said, what about us? What about us? What about us? Why should we be denied jobs and denied these positions and all these other things? What about us? Especially now we have a new principle for morality, the principle of consenting adults. We are consenting adults. So why should my sexual preference now stop me from getting a job, having position and, these type of things in society? And of course people said, well, that's kind of true, isn't it? Consenting adults, people's rights, human rights. So along came the homosexuals. The point is that once that door was opened, it didn't stop there. They didn't just stop with saying our rights. They came with a full wave to try to promote their way on the rest of the society. So today in America, you find children reading books in primary school. In primary school, textbooks that they're learning about when they're learning family studies and home studies, these type of things, subjects. Books entitled My Two Dads. Yeah. My Two Dads. The children are being taught, I know in Canada, they're being taught, because it's affected Canada also, teachers are going away from talking about mother and father and just talking about parents. So they're being taught, yes, your parents can be two men, or it could be two women, or it could be a man and a woman. You see, and this is being promoted on a greater and greater scale. Okay, of course, those who would say from their side, secularists who say, well, what's wrong with that? What's the harm? Well, what is the harm? AIDS is the harm. That's the harm. AIDS. Where did AIDS come from? Which is killing people. Not only homosexuals, and it began with them, but it's killing also heterosexuals. And who amongst them? But the adulterers and the fornicators. So we can see these are the categories. Homosexuals, adulterers, and fornicators. These are the ones spreading AIDS. And of course, some of their blood gets into the blood supply. So people who are not involved in these corruptions also get ill. But the vast majority that are being harmed by AIDS, dying from this illness, are who? Fornicators, adulterers, and homosexuals. That's the harm. Furthermore, before AIDS, back in the 70s, I remember reading that the medical body announced that herpes, another sexually transmitted disease, herpes, had reached epidemic proportions in America in the 70s. Herpes has no cure. They don't even talk about it anymore. Why? Except I saw statistics last year where it said that 1 in every 5 Americans has herpes, 1 in every 5 Brits has herpes. And where is this coming from? But from free sex. Back to the way of the animals, right? Survival of the fittest. Right? The evolutionary theory. We want to live that life. So the reality is that the secularist approach, which rejects religion, encourages and works towards sexual abandon in the society. So in America, commonly speaking, the average school, when the boys go and play gym, play football or whatever, when they finish, they come back to take a shower. They all shower in one big room. There's just one big room with shower heads around the room. So you have to go in there and shower naked. Everybody. When I went to school in Canada, in Toronto, we had swimming class. We all had to swim naked. And you couldn't get out of it unless you had a special letter from the doctor. From the doctor, not even your parents, from the doctor, saying you have some kind of deformity, it's embarrassing for you, whatever, so you're excused. Okay? Otherwise, you had to go swimming naked. This is an attack. This is an attack where the society is feeling that even senses of shyness, the natural shyness that people have, they feel this is some kind of sickness, some kind of psychological illness that we have that we need to overcome, where we shouldn't feel shy about our bodies. The result of that is what? The nudist beaches, the nudist camps, all that came out with it. So that way of thinking invites to sexual abandon, and the end result we are seeing visually in this century with the cases of herpes, AIDS, and there is no end. It is not going to get better. It's only going to get worse. Another consequence in the secular society is that though they have denied the existence of God, human beings in their normal lives have a sense that there is something beyond them. Right? There's something controlling their lives which they really can't quite put their finger on. If you ask two people or ask a person, listen, you are living very nicely. You've got a nice house, a nice car, you had good education, etc., etc. Now, look at so-and-so. He was born the same time as you, in the same society, etc. But look, he's living really difficult. He doesn't have a home. He's on the street. He doesn't have any kind of success in his life. Why is that? What is the answer of the secularist? How does he explain this? He says, my good luck. His bad luck. I'm lucky. And what you find is that when you start to track the secularist down, from the time he wakes up in the morning until the time he goes to bed at night, why this, why that, why the other, why? Good luck, bad luck, good luck, bad luck, good luck, bad luck. You see? So you'll find that good luck, bad luck now is the controlling forces in his life. So what he's done really, because the term used for luck also is fortune. They'll say my good fortune, the other term used. Fortune comes from the Latin fortuna, who was the goddess of luck. Right? So they have just replaced the true God with the false gods of ancient pagan society. This is what governs their life. And you'll see people being very superstitious. Very superstitious. You'll find either they're wearing little chains with, rabbit's feet and horseshoes and all these kind of things. They'll stick it here, stick it there in the car, all over the place. This is for good luck. Don't walk under any ladders and, don't break any mirrors and all of this to avoid bad luck. So much so, for example, that you find in America, this one of the big builders and rich personalities, Donald Trump, whenever he builds a new plaza, Donald Trump, he has to build these huge, hypermarket type, structures. Whenever he's going to build one, what does he do? He flies over a, what do you call this, a feng shui something like this, expert from China to come and sit down with his architects to determine how to build his building. Why? To ensure success for himself. And every year people are coming up with new sources of good luck. You find people very, very superstitious. In fact, there was, that famous movie, Apollo 13, right? This is about an actual circumstance when the Americans had sent this spacecraft to land on the moon, and it didn't work out. They had some problems there. It looked like they were going to miss the moon and go off into the sun or whatever. And for Americans, this was a big, big, tragedy. For the Russians, they had been experimenting, sending people up in space, flying off, and they would hear them, help, 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 help. In Russia, people are expendable. It was no problem. They could send up. But in America, one single American life is just, so precious. This is why when it was decided here in Singapore that they were going to cane that little American boy, remember? The whole country was up in arms. You're going to cane one of our little boys. Of course, the boy, when he went back to America, You know, he got arrested, you know, for some crimes. Right? There's an innocent little boy. He went back there and committed even more crimes. Okay. Anyway, so the issue of that one little boy, that's America, one of our citizens. So the idea that their Apollo spacecraft was going to go off into space and, you know, a group of them were going to die, this was something tragic for them. Anyway, eventually they were able to do this and that, and they got the spacecraft to come back. Splashed down in the Atlantic, they picked them up, brought them into Cape Canaveral. When they came off the plane, you know, the reporters rushed up to them to ask, you know, to snapping pictures, and they addressed the commander and they asked him, how do you feel? His response was, I should have known this was going to happen. I said, yeah. What happened? Was there a fuel leak? Was there some glitches in the computers? Or no, none of these things. Then how? He said, it was Apollo 13. I said, what? Apollo 13, which took off at 1,300 hours. 1 o'clock, right? 1,300 hours. On Friday the 13th. I should have known this was going to happen. You know, this is a man with a PhD in astrophysics, and, you know, this was his response. He should have known. So in America, you can't find any 13th floor in any buildings. I don't know how it is here in Singapore. Maybe it's different. The 13 doesn't have the same significance. But in America, you can't find a 13th floor. Whether you're in a hotel or an apartment building, they all go on the elevator 10, 11, 12, 14. No 13. You can't find a house named number 13 on any street. You go walking down the street, they go 10, 11, 12, 12 and a half, 14. This is the end result of the secularist approach. You have to put something else there. Something else to give you a sense of security and explanation, you know, for why things are happening to you in your life. And as a result of this also, the latest, you know, wave of the UFO phenomena, right? Which began, you notice it really began around the 50s, the UFO thing. And this is when secularism was taking root in American society. The UFO. How does the UFO fulfill secularist needs? Well, when you have now removed God and meaning from life and existence, why we are here now, we become very insignificant when you look at us within the whole cosmos, this huge cosmos that is there. Is it just us alone in this whole thing? Well, if it's by chance, according to them, chance should mean that there should have appeared some other people like us somewhere else in the galaxy. This is what chance tells us that it should happen. You know, as they say, if you put 10 monkeys in a cage, and you give them 10 typewriters, and you give them an infinite amount of time, one of them is going to bang with his nose, his fingers, and his toes, and he's going to type out a Quran for you. Sometime along it's going to do it, you know, because anything is possible, given enough time. That's their way of thinking. So there has to be some other planet on one of these other stars out there that is like us. You know, they've been looking for how long now? How much money they've spent on radio telescopes, everything else, trying to listen in to hear that message coming from outer space. But all they're getting is static, nothing. Right? Till finally they had to make a movie, Contact, right? This movie was about, finally they heard it, right? Like, real life, it wouldn't happen. That was Carl Sagan, you know, it was dedicated to Carl Sagan. It was his movie. He was one of the biggest atheists there in America, secularists. So the UFO, what does the UFO tell these people? UFO gives meaning to life again for them. Because you think of it this way. If we weren't important, then why is it that beings would come from all the way across the galaxy, all the way to the Earth, you know, to take pictures of us, take us up in their space planes, do little experiments on us? We must be important. You know, this is why they're coming all this way. So this again gives them a sense of meaning, importance. On the other hand, the religious answer to man and society is first and foremost that human beings are not an accident of nature. The belief in God is logical. It's not illogical, as they would have us think. No, it is logical. Why is it logical? Because it conforms with our own experience. The basic argument presented, for example, in the scriptures, in the Quran, is that design indicates a designer. Basic argument. When you're walking on the beach and you see a footprint in the sand, do you stop to think and say to yourself, how amazing it is that the waves would come in and sink into the sand and make a footprint? No. You say, somebody walked here. That's what it indicates to you. Where there is design, I mean, you take cans of paint. If you think about it, if you took cans of blue, yellow, and red paint, and just closed your eyes and threw it against the wall, do you think there would come a time, if you did this enough times, that you would come up with a Mona Lisa? You think those colors just splashing together one day is going to get you a Mona Lisa? Doesn't. When you see Mona Lisa, the painting Mona Lisa, you think of the artist who painted it. This is our experience. Sir Isaac Newton, on one occasion, was recorded that he had built this machine which was demonstrating the movement of the planets around the sun. Made out of brass, you cranked it up, and as you crank it up, you see the planets would move around the sun. And one of his friends, an atheist, had come by and saw the machine and said, "Whew, that's wonderful. You know, where did you get this machine from?" He said, "It just happened. It just appeared one day." He said, "Don't be ridiculous. You made the thing. How did you make it? You know, what did you?" He said, "Is this any more ridiculous than your idea that this whole world came here by accident?" This was his response. This is how ludicrous the idea that our existence is a product of accident. And of course, we can find in the Quran itself God challenging, there's not too many verses really challenging the disbelievers, those who deny God's existence, because of the fact that those who denied God's existence were not many. Throughout history, there have been few. It's only in recent times that it became the state religion of Russia, of China, Albania, and certain other countries. But prior to that, there was always a small element among the society that had this kind of belief. So in the Quran you can find, in the 52nd chapter, Surah At-Tur, verses 35 and 36, Allah there saying, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ أَمْ خَلَقُوا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بَلْ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. Were they created from nothing or by nothing? Or were they themselves the creators? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? No, they really don't have any certain knowledge. Allah puts before them, God puts before them there, were you created from nothing? I mean, appearing, for something to appear out of nothing violates reason. So, no. The next question, well, did you create yourself? That is self-contradictory. Because for you to create yourself, you had to first not exist. And if you didn't exist, then how could you make yourself exist? So the only conclusion you can come to is that what is here was created by a creator. Now, in spite of the attitude that I mentioned of the psychologists over the years with regards to belief in God, that this was something invented by human beings, the anthropologists, the more and more they studied human societies, they found that everywhere that they went, people believed in God. Everywhere they went. This explanation of Freud's, they knew it was, questionable, because Durkheim had his own explanation Others had their own explanations. It's just all guesses, things thrown out there. How do we explain that belief in God everywhere? Some anthropologists British anthropologists started to propose the idea that perhaps it is genetic. The others, of course, scoffed at the idea. Genetic? What is this? Well, this year, an article appeared in the Sunday Times. This is in England. Sunday Times. 2nd of November. Actually, sorry, it's last year. 2nd of November, 97. The title of the article is, "God Spot is Found in the Brain." They found the God spot. What is that? God spot found in the brain. The experiments that they've been doing with people who have different problems, neurological problems, etc., where they put probes into different parts of the brain, trying to find out where's the part that's gone wrong, whatever. They found a common spot that whenever they put the little probe in there, the person would report that they had these overwhelming religious experiences when they came out of it. Everybody they found with the same spot in their brain. So they ended up making this conclusion. This is, of course, there's ongoing research on it, but they said, as they put it, the scientists said that although the research and its conclusions are preliminary, initial results suggest that the phenomenon of religious belief is hardwired into the brain. That's their conclusion. Well, guess what? That's what religion says. That belief in God is genetic. It is the part of human nature. Furthermore, okay, if we accept that belief in God is basic, the issue now is, did God create human beings and then just left them and the world to carry on their own without sending any prophets or messages or things? You have a group of people who made this conclusion. They're the deists, right? They believe there's a God, but no religion. This religion thing is man-made. Too many religions around. So I can't conclude which one is which, so better to say human beings made them up. In the end, of course, they end up in the same status as the secularists, because how do we then determine the laws for our society and functioning within society? We have to make up the laws ourselves, because God didn't give us any instructions. It's human beings who made them up. The other group is the group that hold that yes, God created man and he provided instructions for human beings how to live their lives. Now, one group holds that God created man from himself, because for them, looking at what we do when we create, we make things from things that are already there. This podium was once a tree. We cut it down. We cut it into a shape. We melted a few stones, took some metal out, we made screws and nails, and we banged it all together. Now we have a podium. So whatever we create, whatever we make it from something that was already there. So for them, they said, well, okay, if in the beginning was God, and God created, he must have created from himself. So he took a piece of his head, and he made some people. He took a piece of his arms, he made another set of people. A piece of his legs, he made another set of people. Feet, he made people. So people are in different castes. Right? The top caste was the Brahmins, and the bottom caste was the Shudras. Okay? This was their explanation. Of course, this is kind of problematic because it has with it, deep prejudices, which society has been fighting against, the idea of locking people into segments and saying they're inferior to other people. Because for the Shudras, if their shadow falls on the Brahmin, he has to go and wash himself, take a bath. You know, this kind of view is a very, very negative view of human society. Furthermore, in that system, God and man are one. The human soul is divine. So what happens, that life is about knowing that you are in fact divine. God comes to the earth, walks around every now and then. They're called avatars, God-men who walk around. There are a couple right now in India, you know, who are gods among men, and people worship them. You see? So that reduces human beings to a state where they're worshiping other human beings. You know. In the case of other religions, we find Christianity said it only happened one time. God became a man only one time. Not like you all think every now and then. No, just one time. But the end result is still the same. God becoming a man is a contradiction in terms. God is God, man is man. If God became man, he became a created being, then he was in need of a creator. That's a contradiction in terms. Well, they would say, well, no, but God can do all things, can't he? We say, yeah, God can do all things, but all things that don't make him not God. Because if we say, can God die? Can God become a mosquito and you can catch him there? This is nonsense. This is ludicrous. Because what you're doing is you're making God less than himself. This is not possible. God is God. He's able to do all things consistent with him being God, not becoming less than God. Those are the ludicrous things. These are excluded from God being able to do all things. So, the only thing that's left, the only religion that provides the view of one God, one true God, and one true race of human beings, necessitating one religion, because if there is one God and there is only one race, the human race, then there should only be one religion. Why should God provide many different religions for one people with one set of needs? So, the one religion is Islam. This is the only religion which encompasses all of these, the concepts necessary of the one God, one race. Why? Because this whole issue of race is actually false. I know you hear there's Chinese race, there's Malay race, and Caucasoid race, meaning the white people, Negroid race, meaning black people, Africans. But really, there's only the human race. Because if a Chinese person is sick and he needs a blood transfusion, he is type A blood. All of his Chinese friends are B, O, but there's a Malay with A-type blood, then the blood of that Malay can save his life and nobody else's can. So who is closer to him or her? Is it the one just simply because there are similarities in the way they look? No. That blood, God left this in human beings to let them know that they are one race. Because one whose blood can save your life has got to be closer to you than others whose blood cannot. Because that's the end. Nothing, what else is more critical than your life, your existence? This is among the signs of God within human beings, that we are all one race. And Islam provides that religion. That religion which is not the religion started 1,400 years ago, but according to Islamic teachings, it was the religion of the first man on this earth, Adam, and his wife, Eve, and was the religion of all of the prophets till the last of the prophets, Muhammad. May God's peace and blessings be on all of them. That religion is a comprehensive religion. Islam governs all aspects of life. It does not leave unto Caesars what is Caesar's and unto God what is God's. There's no separation between church and state. No, it is all one. Whether it's economic, it's political, it's social, it's all interlinked. There are instructions from God to deal with all aspects of human life. Now the question arises, how can it be that a religion from 1,400 years ago be relevant today, we're beginning the 21st century? How? When we look at all the other laws, we talked about the American Constitution, the Magna Carta, and the others, these become ludicrous based on our understanding today. How can it be that this law revealed 1,400 years ago be relevant to today's time? It is relevant because it is from God. That is how. Because it is truly from God. It is not a product of human preparation and creation. It is purely from God. And as such, when God created human beings, God knew how their societies would function, what their individual needs were. Therefore, he gave the laws, the primary and critical laws, to govern human society, because those laws deal with issues about human beings which do not change. They're issues which don't change. So, when we look at some of the issues, and I'll just mention a few of them to round off the presentation, where people may say, okay, you say that this Islam is relevant till today. What about polygamy? Enlightened society has recognized that polygamy is nonsense. We can't have this stuff, Monogamy is what we should be doing. And look at this polygamy thing. Islam says polygamy is from the law of God. Why? Because it is a part of human nature and human society. I know some of the women don't want to hear this, right? Yeah, we're Muslim women, but this polygamy thing, we kind of side with these, these other people about monogamy, right? Western researchers. There's an article I have here for those afterwards who'd like to read it, from Time magazine, 15th of August, 1994. This is an article, quite a long article, where a number of scientists, evolutionary scientists, are arguing now that polygamy is genetic. Now, of course, people might say, well, look, they were arguing also that homosexuality is genetic too. Because you have the homosexual, in defense. And they found this one a few years back. There was one Canadian scientist who did some experiments with identical twins, and his conclusion was, yes, homosexuality was genetic. He published his results. It affected certain cases that were in Texas, in the court cases dealing with homosexuals, etc., etc. People were astounded. However, within a year and a half after that, other universities in Canada tried to reproduce his results, and they couldn't get the same results. And in the United States, they also tried the same experiments, and they couldn't get the same results. So a big question mark was put on his study. And it came out that he was a homosexual. So doctoring results, we can't put it in the same category. Now, this research, these are the evolutionary scientists, and of course, As we said, they always like to look at the animal kingdom and then compare human beings with animals. So they looked at the animal kingdom. They said, okay, the Lion King. Why does the Lion King have all the women? Because he was the strongest. He had the loudest roar, you know. He would beat up all the other male lions and take the majority of the women for himself. So they said, hey, there is an evolutionary advantage in this. What is it? Because their principle is that human society progresses and improves. Why? Because of the principle of what? Survival of the fittest. So when the Lion King has all the lionesses to himself, and he's the strongest, it means the next generation of baby lions are going to be carrying his genes, which are the stronger genes. So here was the evolutionary advantage for polygamy. That's their argument. Anyway, the point is that if we look at human society, as much as we said women don't really like to hear this, you cannot find a society as far back as you go in history, no matter what corner of the world you go in, how primitive, how advanced, whatever, except that they're practicing polygamy. You can't find them. 99.999% of all civilizations we have ever discovered on this earth have practiced polygamy. Hey, this is saying something. It's saying that it is a part and parcel of human society. Islam didn't invent polygamy. No, people who are not monogamous in Islam came along and said, polygamy? No. It was already there. It was already there everywhere in the world. In fact, our so-called monogamous societies, when they did surveys of the average American male, married male, they found that over 70% of married males in the United States admitted to having extramarital affairs. Where is your monogamy? That's polygamy right there. But it's polygamy without consequence, right? Extramarital relations are there. They're practicing polygamy. The most monogamous of societies have prostitutes, girlfriends, everything else. So polygamy is ongoing, but there is no responsibility. What Islam says is that, yes, this is part of human society, human nature, then it should be within guidelines. There should be bounds that protect. And in fact, the system of polygamy in Islam protects the interest of women and children. Because where people say monogamy, but then they have relations outside of marriage, the woman suffers. The children that come out of those relationships suffer. Whereas with polygamy, then the woman is treated as another wife. She has honor. Her children carry the name of the father. They have honor. There is a protection for the female and the children by polygamy according to the Islamic system, where rules and regulations are there to protect the interests of all. So polygamy is not something unique to Islam, but it is something which is there, permitted in Islam, not obliged. People are not obliged to be polygamous, and this is again a misunderstanding. Many non-Muslims I've met, they think, every Muslim male Muslim has more than one wife, right? In fact, I even met one brother in England, British brother, he told me, he had wanted to accept Islam for over a year, but he had stopped himself from accepting Islam because he was under the impression that if he accepted Islam, he had to take another wife. And he was satisfied with his wife that he had. He just felt he didn't want to take another wife, right? Till finally, somebody found out what was it, his hang up, and explained, no. Islam doesn't insist. Not every male must have another wife. No. It's a permission given and conditional. One has to have the means, the ability, etc., right? And this is based on human need. Human societies have an abundance of females in it by God's will. Women live longer than men. They live longer than men. When there's violence in the society, who is killed? Men killing men, mostly. You have a few men killing some women and some women killing men, but mostly it's men killing men. Wars. What are the wars? Men killing men. And then with the rise of homosexuality, even less men available. So the need for polygamy is something which God ordained. It is part of human society. It will be there, and it is valid. We can see the benefits from it. It is far more logical than the other point of view where they say it's okay, you can have a girlfriend, as many girlfriends as you want, mistresses, as many as you want, but don't marry one of them. You know, it's quite illogical, really. The other issue is that of veiling. The other thing, oh, look at you. You cover up your women, you oppress them, make them wear all these things, covering themselves up. You know. You see, freedom, where is personal freedom here? Well, this covering of women is for the benefit of women. As Allah said, describing them when He said, يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِيبِهِنَّ لِيُعْرَفْنَ وَلَا يُؤْذَيْنَ. That they should put their outer garments over themselves so that they be known and not be harmed. That they be known. Known how? Because some people think that wearing this veil means that you become anonymous, meaning that you're not known. So they will say, well, when I wear this veil, especially if I go to the West or something like this, everybody looks at me. But the point is that it is not about not being looked at, but it is how you are looked at. Because when a nun who wears the traditional dress, because of course modern nuns, you have modernist nuns now who wear mini skirts and little things on their heads, but the traditional nuns who wear the habit, the whole thing, when they walk down the streets, yeah, people look. And when a woman walks in a bikini on the beach, people look. But is the looking of the bikini the same as the looking as the habit? No, it's not the same. So the issue is not about the look. The issue is how they look. So that they be known. Known in the same way that when you see a nun, you know that she's not about hanky-panky. No. This is a woman who does not have relations with men. Period. That's in her case. In Islam, she's only with her husband. So you don't approach her. This is the statement. It's a statement of chastity. And that she not be harmed. She not be harmed. What is the consequence of the modern styles of nakedness for women? What is the consequence? The consequence is abuse. That they are abused and molested in the societies where sex is free. You can buy it. No problem. Girlfriends, all the other things, yet you have over 1 million cases of rape yearly in America. 1 in every 5 American women has been raped. This is the latest statistics. So, is it really to their advantage to expose themselves? No. The covering of the woman is to protect her from the sexual glance, which leads to harm. Her harm, because all those 1 million rapes that are reported, it's not too many women raping men, right? It's the other way around. This is the reality. It's women who suffer. So the veiling of the woman is for her protection. It is not something imposed on her in the sense that, they're trying to push her into the background so she has no role in society, she shouldn't be seen, and so no. It is for her protection. In the case of prohibition of alcohol, this is a part of Islamic law. If you look at the prohibitions, of course, the harm of alcohol, who has to argue it? America in the 20s decided it was so harmful they decided to ban it. They had the period of prohibition. But because the society was not mentally geared, they had not accepted this law from God, but just this was human beings deciding, then they rebelled. So eventually, even though they knew it was not good for them, they eventually rebelled against it until they had to repeal it. But the harm of alcohol is known. And of course you have this doctor who comes up and says, well, if you drink half a glass of wine with your meal, it helps in digestion. Your chances of heart attack may be less. Wonderful. But when you consider how many lives are destroyed with alcohol, in America, 40% of violent crimes are people in a state of intoxication. You look at the process of car accidents in a week, when the traffic police, when they monitor it, you see they have graphs, right? You'll see the car accidents like this, from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then backs down again. Every weekend, it just jumps up. Christmas, way off the Richter scale, Why? Because these are the times they get intoxicated and they're just killing themselves on the roads. The harm that comes from alcohol is obvious. Islam's prohibition is reasonable, it's logical, and it's practical. People usually don't argue that one too hard, but they'll come back, what about this cutting off of their hands? You like to cut off people's hands when they steal. Isn't that barbaric? How can we do that today, 21st century, cutting off hands? Well, we say, look, the concept of the penal system in the West changed from punishment to rehabilitation. This was the idea. People said, no, let's not punish these people anymore. It's not about punishing them because it's not really their fault. The society went wrong somewhere along the line. This is what's caused them to be like that. So why should we punish them? No, we should rehabilitate them. Well, guess what? They still haven't found a way to rehabilitate. All these years since they came up with that idea back in the 50s, we're now in the 90s, and they have not succeeded in rehabilitating. People go into the prisons, and they come out, if they were stealing small time before, they come out as big-time thieves afterwards. They get training, they get practice, they have their plans. When they come out, I'm not going to get caught this next time. I'm ready, I know what to do now. The prisons become training grounds for crime. So it's failed. It has failed, and this is why the death penalty, which was revoked in most of the states in America, they're bringing it back state after state after state. Because they realize that the punishment factor has to be there to deter. That's to deter people, to discourage them from crime. Because if you don't think there's any consequence for your crime, then you're going to do it. You're encouraged to do it. Once you remove the principle of deterrence, a punishment, if I do it, I'm going to get punished, then okay, I'm going to think twice about doing it. But if you know there's no punishment, or you're just in jail for a year, in England, the average life sentence comes down to 12 years. When you get life, you get 12 years. So right now in England, there's a big to-do about these pedophiles. There's a group of pedophiles that had gotten little boys, raped them, killed them, murdered them, buried them, and they were put in jail for life, and they're coming back out again. They're coming back out. After 12 years, they're coming back out. And psychiatrists have sat with them and asked them, what their ideas were, has it changed, so and so. And they admit to the psychiatrists that they're likely to do it again. And they have to let them out because their time is up. And the society, they don't know what to do. Because their values, the way of the whole system of criminal punishment and justice has become so distorted, they can't deal now with crime in society. So, Islam says when a person steals, you cut off his hand. But is it every person? For any little thing you cut off their hand? No. There are particular cases. It has to be for an amount whose value is more than, say, $100+. And it has to have some value. Secondly, it could not have been something which was left out of its place. You take off your Rolex watch, you leave it on the table, somebody snatches it. No, they're not going to cut his hand off. That's temptation, right? It will not be if you steal from your boss when he owed you money, right? He didn't pay you your wages, and you stole from him, they'll not cut your hand off, no. In fact, they'll punish your boss. Because he should have paid you. In Islam, you're supposed to pay the worker before his sweat dries on his brow. If it's in a time of famine, people are starving, trying to get something to survive, you get something to eat, they're not going to cut your hand off. So the hand is cut for the deliberate thief, the pickpocket. You don't pickpocket by accident. You got to train yourself. how to bounce into somebody, step on their foot or whatever. They're thinking of that, and you got your hand in their pocket. This is something you have to train yourself with. So these are professional criminals. These are the ones who lose their hands when we catch them. Right? And when they lose a hand, it is a statement, because it will be taken off publicly. It is a statement in the society. That man is going to think 100 times before he steals again. And everyone who watched it, who heard about it, is going to think themselves before they steal. And this is why in the newspapers it was reported that, this is in Sudan, when they applied Islamic law there, back in 1983, that within 3 years, and this is after they let out all of the prisoners that were in jail. This is Numeri's time. He let out over 13,000 prisoners who had been tried, but not according to Islamic law. So they let them out. They said, we're going to institute Islamic law from here on in. After 3 years, they found that crimes, particularly burglary and theft, had dropped by over 40%. By over 40%. So the effects are clear. Where Islamic law is applied, though it might seem harsh, etc., it is applied not just arbitrarily, it's applied in specific circumstances. To protect the rest of the society. Why should the society suffer? A man steals, you put him in jail for, 1 year or 6 months or 2 years. Who is suffering here? You have given him free room and board. It's like a hotel. He has a television, he has free 3 meals a day. He's the one who stole, and the society has to pay for him for the next year. No. Islam says, no, he steals, we take his hand off. He's the one who should pay. He's the one who should pay. So, though they may perceive, or others, some may perceive this as being very barbaric, the reality is that it works. It works. In the area, the last point I'd like to mention is that in terms of Muslim beliefs, with regards to destiny. Because this is an area that oftentimes people say, well, Muslims are fatalistic. This belief in destiny, that everything is written, means, people are fatalistic. It's not healthy for society. It doesn't give them the desire to strive, etc., etc. Well, belief in destiny does not contradict striving, making one's best effort. Islam encourages us to make our best effort because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ مِنْ أَحَدِكُمْ إِذَا عَمِلَ عَمَلًا أَنْ يُتْقِنَهُ. That Allah loves from each and every one of you, if you do something, you do it to the best of your ability. Ihsan means doing the best. Islam encourages doing our best. So, belief in the destiny does not affect that at all. What belief in destiny does is it gives the believer a sense of place and serenity in this world system. He or she feels themselves living within the laws of God, that what is happening to them is by God's decree. So if they're patient with it, they benefit from it. God rewards them, So they strive to be patient, to handle the trials and tribulations that comes in each and every person's life. It gives them that sense of balance. How to deal with difficulty in life. So their lives are calm. They're able to survive. They're able to handle their situations. As a matter of fact, I was reading this article. It was concerning the war in Somalia. There's an article in the newspaper, and it had a picture of some Americans sitting in this chair. Behind them was a little mosque, and they were being interviewed. The interviewer was asking them what had happened. They became Muslims. So the interviewer was quite amazed, how it is that you all could become Muslims when Somalia, people are killing themselves and starvation and all this that is going on there. Why would you want to become a part of that? Become a Muslim. So they were saying, this one white American, he was saying, Well, you know, in spite of all the trials that these people are facing, the hunger, the starvation, etc., etc., he said the people could still smile. I could still see joy in people's face with life. I mean, for myself, you know, back in America, life is a painful thing. All you have to do is to sit in the subway in New York City and look at people's faces as they go to work in the morning. Everybody's, it's like it's just a, you know, it's a pain. Faces are twisted. Though they're living very comfortable, wonderful lives in that sense. But there's pain there, personal pain, everything is tragic. So what happens in America? Anytime anything goes wrong, article here, Miami, Florida. An investor who suffered heavy stock market losses shot and killed a brokerage manager, wounded his personal broker, and then turned his gun on himself. The man had lost $8 million in investments in the stock markets. He still had a few millions left. I mean, it didn't mean he went broke. He still had a few millions left, but the fact that he lost 8 million, that just sent him berserk. He went and killed his, you know, the stockbroker and killed himself. And how many cases you have in America? You know, a guy loses his job, he's fired from his job. First thing he does, he goes to the gun shop, he buys himself a Kalashnikov, he's back in his office mowing everybody down. You know, even recently they had a case of a little boy, young boy, in school. His girlfriend dumped him. What did he do? He gathered up all these little guns, he came into the schoolyard, he started shooting down everybody. This is a sense, this is the secular product, where a person has no sense of God and of destiny. So life becomes so tragic, you know, things are just unbearable. So you have to have all what they call stress management. You have to have psychologists, psychiatrists who have to come in with the workers and help them to deal with their stresses. And Islam, the principle of destiny, that it is all written. Nothing will happen to you which was not written for you. Nothing will not happen to you which was not written for you. This gives the believer in this life a sense of serenity that those who don't believe will not have. So I think when we look at the principles, and I've just brought a few common ones, and there are many others people will raise also, but when you look at them, we can see a relevance in all of the principles of Islamic teaching, whether it has to do with the social teachings like dress and marriage and things like this, or it has to do with criminal law prohibitions of alcohol, criminal law execution of murderers, rapists, etc., or whether it has to do with the belief system. All of them are relevant today. And they will remain relevant until the last person is on this earth. Human society in the century to come needs religion. It has to come back to religion. Its salvation, its success lies in coming back to religion, otherwise it will destroy itself. No matter how well people have organized societies and, you know, line things up this way and that way, etc., there is a time bomb ticking there that is going to explode. And only religion is the answer. And the correct answer is the true religion, Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.